Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Maui, the occupied islands of Hawaii by the United States government. Today, September 9th, 2021. I hope this finds you well, wherever you may be. Today's sharing, a little bit of a departure from the previous 2 days about the gift of Burma. I want to continue that soon, but just a personal sharing today, very personal. They're all very personal. I came to Maui after having been in Los Angeles for nearly a year, and nearly a year before that in Bali and Burma. And in Los Angeles, many of you know, those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I wrote a book, Extinction, X-rated. It's an autofictional dark satire on how I feel we could possibly remove violence from the genome. At the end of that process, literally the day after it was published, I was talking to my beloved friend, Janine Davies in Vancouver, and I had a very sharp pain in my chest, and I went to the emergency room and they diagnosed me with a fatal illness with this an acutely enlarged aortic aneurysm, the largest vessel in the body out of the heart. And that they likened it to a tragic image, talk about medical tyranny, a ticking bomb with a short fuse that will explode at any second. And if you do not undergo an extremely dangerous, potentially life-saving surgery, you are a ticking bomb. You will die. You will die, okay? And I chose, after 3 months of investigation, numerous doctors and surgeons and cardiac nurses and research, not easy to research, to choose non-surgery. I want to say at this time, but it may very well be forever until the next. And I left Los Angeles to come to Maui to meet a few people. And this is by way of introducing today's talk. I met the final person I was to meet in desiring to come to Hawaii yesterday. I don't want to name her by name, but only by function. I would call her a doorway angel. A medical professional who has dedicated her life to the understanding of end-of-life care, dealing specifically with people who are diagnosed as terminal. And just the word terminal, I mean, who isn't terminal? But at the same time, there are those who are in hospice who qualify for the word terminal. It's all very relative, isn't it? I met her yesterday. And I guess the insights which I wish to share today. One that's very bold that comes to heart is my attempt, our attempt, maybe not for you, but for me, taking the death out of dying, taking the fear out of death, bringing not just joy, but radiant rapture to living. Taking the agenda out of time, removing destination from the journey, challenging arrival versus the process. Is that really possible? Is it really desired? And I notice that I teeter between literal reality and surreal reality and conditioning, and then the momentum of the unconscious. And we had a 2-hour conversation. You could call it a conversation. I don't know what it was really, but it's not really a conversation. It's the intimate exploration of areas of heart and mind, emotionality and psychology in a short period of time to acquaint the other and oneself with the protocol of how to engage your life when you are terminal. The concept of hospice, the requirements of hospice, and more specifically, dare even use the word, the end of life care and mitigation of complexity and pain and suffering through conscious use of therapeutics and supplements and extracts and, of course, pharmaceutical substances, drugs. And when is it acceptable, legally acceptable? When is it medically acceptable? When is it religiously acceptable? When is it that you have your right to embody the truth of your own biological being on the terms of your own dignity, your own conscience, your own self-love, your own compassion? When do you wish to facilitate the transition from life to death, to rebirth, whatever it is that your belief systems bring to you? And we talked about what it meant, what it means, what it does feel like to even entertain the possibility of transitioning consciously, mindfully, the whole process of euthanasia. Challenging concept. I mean, just really out of the blue. Here you are, healthy, doing yoga, having great wine, walking the beach, talking to friends, listening to music, singing, creating, writing films and books, and doing all kinds of things normally. And then all of a sudden, yes, the appointment comes to be, and you have this 1.5-hour, 2-hour conversation with the angel, the doorway to the other, talking about end of life. And I had to make it clear that, as the doctors had told me in Los Angeles, and even the hospital and the doctors and some of the nurses here on island, based upon the diagnoses that you have, there is 0 chance of survival if your aneurysm were to dissect or rupture, burst. Essentially, the joke is don't even bother to call 911. I knew that leaving Los Angeles, and it brought it up again. It's sort of like we talk about trauma and stress and anxieties and the triggers. And you're in a room, you're talking about life and your death, and the transition between this moment and you can't get in unless you're terminal. And you go, terminal, wow. How surreal is that to let in? And it's like, okay, it's normal. It happens to everything and everyone. It's so normal, so bizarre, so dystopian and so surreal, so subconscious, so irrational and yet so true, so pure, so magnificent, so breath relieving, breathtaking, and the delicacy, the dance of the intimacy of the dialogue. I so am into flow and style and improvisational ease of presence, and here you are talking to a complete, I've known you for a lifetime's stranger. About the end of your life. A very challenging pain involved in an aneurysm, as I read and watch films and am told by doctors, a very tormenting, searing pain. And so what substances, what drugs might mitigate that? How could you even get them onto your body, into your mouth, injected, whatever? I mean, why aren't you living with someone, Alan? It's like you driving, flying. Why aren't you living with someone? Because we're talking about the end of life. It means any second. She's saying any second you could be in that type of pain that you anticipate, and that you're here talking with me about how to mitigate. And I'm going like, wow, you got to think all these little blind spots. So like, right, if you're somewhat unconscious and you're writhing in pain, how do you get that into your body to mindfully ease the suffering? And so it's this orchestration of detail, and all of a sudden you go, okay, wow, this is really interesting. Really, really interesting. And so I have to have more insight into the orchestration of how to coexist with an illness and with the likelihood of demise, and how to skillfully handle all that, which is amazing to live in a country, on an island, in a state, in a province, in a township, where there are people among us that talk and relate and deliver and do these types of things. What blessings I felt being there in the arms and the spirit of this angel, this doorway angel. I'm trying my best to just share a significant moment. It's not coming across particularly clear, I'm sure, and I left her space and did what I normally do. I went to the beach. And this brings up the title of today's sharing. Taking the death out of dying. And no longer going from here to there. There's something, I hear myself say that, I don't know about how you hear it. No longer going from here to there. And how easy it is, I noticed my mind processing the experience yesterday and quite frankly the last 5 months, walking on the beach in this ferocious, as you know, the ferocious winds and the light, the intensity of the colors and the water, the fabric of the water, just visually the fabric, to see it. It's undulating, frothing, lapping in this infinite amount of molecules of sand on the beach, and you go into an extrapolation to all beaches on all shorelines on all continents, and you, wow, this nature that you're embedded in. And I looked up at the sky as I'm walking and kind of imagining I'm on the ridge of somewhere in the Himalayan mountains, a kind of tropical Himalayas, and just trekking along on this edge like an existential Sherpa on the razor's edge of life and death and birth and mortality. Aren't we all in the same world, spinning through this strange eternity called existence? And it's like, I'm going like, holy shit, man. And I'm thinking of the drugs that I want, or perhaps have on some relative level, to excite the luminosity of the psychedelic, existential, dharmic, spiritual, trans mortality, trans death. Take me, right? Take me anytime you want. It's not that I'm fearless. I am a being of this world, and wherever I go, I'll be rebirthing constantly should I keep alive my Dharma, my touchstone of sanity. Therein lies where I take the death out of dying. I'm thinking as I'm trekking along on the beach, no longer going from here to the end, to come back, to go back, to go back, to go back, to go back to the car, to go back to Makawa, to go back to the refrigerator, to go back to the shower, to go back to the desk, to go back to dinner, to go back to a glass of wine, to go back to a coffin, to go back to the ocean, to go back to a womb, to go back to birth, to go back to a monastery, to go back, to go back, to go back. I mean, time. The destination from here to there, taking that vocation of ordinary out of your life, Alan. What are you learning from your encounter with these angels? What are you learning from your aneurysm? What are you learning from your in-breath and your out-breath? What are you learning? What is the fabric of your soul teaching you about the greatest principles the universe can offer? Where is the fidelity of your emotionality here? What are the emotions that you're taking refuge in that take time out of living? If you're taking the destination out, where are you taking refuge? In style, in aesthetics, in artistry, in beauty, in a multidimensional poetry that isn't up or down, or in the middle, or in the extremities? Taking location, destination. Is it possible to remove the physics of life and death from consciousness? Is that Buddhism? Is that Dharma? Is that enlightenment? What are you doing? What's the experience of these words? Walking, trekking. How easy it was to just think I'm doing this in order to maintain vibrancy of biology and D3 and light and health. To do it again, to do it again. Isn't this just the Zen of day-to-day life? In-breath, out-breath, neither wish to live nor wish to die. But you will die. It's all relative. But what isn't relative? What is transcendent? And I remembered my life from the beach, living in a monastery. It's just a word, clearly, and that word, like nun or monk or monastery or retreat center or studio, or they're just concepts, clearly. And how easy it is to overlook the intimate, direct experience of being the Dharma that you seek through practice and training, being the chemistry that you wish to find in other that's not yet there. Be the freedom that you wish to develop through the training of consciousness, exploring consciousness in form. Be the transcendent life force beyond death and dying. Be in the experience of liberty. Be, isn't that the word? The being in liberation from fear. Being in liberation from death. But why is death so fearsome to you, Alan? It isn't fearsome at all. In fact, there's a type of, I've never felt so alive after a day of talking about my demise, the end of life, and the quality of care that I wish to bring to the end of life, and those people near me that I wish to be near in that process of life transitioning. But now that it's so well known and everyone's reflecting medically and nurses and all kinds of ways that it's true, you're terminal, but you too are terminal. We're all terminal at the same time. Why focus on the wall? Why focus on the convention at all? Why not really anoint yourself with the most holy reverence to live in the nuministic, the spirit made real by dissolving the molecule, becoming the snowflake, both forming and melting simultaneously? Is it really poetic? Is life that poetic? Is it possible to transcend this collective sorrow over the loss of life? Taking the fear out of dying. And it's so interesting to me. So much of my life I can see now as I reflect back at the stage, living in those monastic years as a monk and as a layperson. What did we do? We were encouraged to take the time out of our own psyche. I mean, I know it's not cliched at all. It's like, if we were on a high dose of psychedelic right now, we would not be thinking, ultimately, probably not, of coming to the end of the day. It'd be so immersive in the dimensionality of journeying, right? It's so immediate, the rapture of consciousness engaging consciousness in its luminous, most nuanced, immersive, felt, experiential, eroticized self-intimacy. The words pointing to this, the fabric of consciousness meeting oxygen, meeting blood, and meeting the soul of totality. And therein lies this unconditional possibility of releasing into the galaxy of what? Mortality and infinity simultaneously. What does it mean in our lives, collectively and individually and community-wise, to take the fear? Or is fear natural? Yeah, okay, we can rave on about psychological, philosophical, spiritual, religious insights into fear versus freedom, love versus anger. But right now, for me right now, the hospice is more of a dreamscape without barrier. A time where I can now commune with transitional energies. Are you with me? Like living in a monastery. Taking the time out of the psyche. In-breath. Don't hasten the next breath. Don't push it out. Don't invite it in. The edge between occupying stillness and conscious engagement. That dynamic of of spiritualized consciousness that is so intimate with dimensional mindfulness. Mindfulness here dimensionally means, for me, the simultaneity of perspective, self on self, insight to externalization, the panorama of vision, and the dimensionality of vision, mindful dimensionality. To occupy stillness and to occupy conscious choice-making engagement. Isn't that those dualities, how nuanced can they be between living and dying every hour, every minute, every few seconds, every in-breath? I remember in the monastery how often we would hear from teachers, neither wish to live nor fear dying. Take the death out of psyche. It's a concept. Don't identify with the body as reality. It is a set of constituents in a dynamic play. Be aware of that dynamic, causal, interrelated play, and play at the edge between freedom and grasping, stillness and engagement, this world and the other world. I would only encourage you, as I've been doing now, especially last night after my beach walk and my reflection, what are these dyads of dynamic polarization, living versus dying, or something inclusive of both in between? That's neither one or the other, but something, oh wow, I get to define my own reality coming out of the monastery. I was so, how should I say, so challenged to no longer be in an environment where destination was not the priority. Outcome wasn't the priority. How to take performance out of sex. How to take outcome, literally, out of eroticism. And how to more and more play without the fear of society's conventional forms of excitement and tyranny, life and death. You rarely ever go to a funeral or memorial where people are rocking out with the most rapturous music and poetry of a life well lived. It's like, if there were exceptions, I could see why sadness could be appropriate. Yes, it's human to miss, but at the same time, look at all the missing that goes on while we're living. Why wait for the tears when the person is no longer present? Reversal of attitudes. And what I'm saying here is my coming to the end of the sharing is, now that I'm living, now that you're living, now that we're living in our Dharma, our spirituality in the world. I don't have the refuge of Burma. It's now a different country under siege. The monasteries are different. There's no more about where to go ultimately. Yes, I must go soon. I must continue this journey of taking care with the necessities of the ordinary until I release myself into the castle of the sanctuary of boundless creative exploration. I'm soon to be there, either in this life or the next, or both. So, no longer going from here to there. What do I mean by that? Knowing how to decathex from the concepts of outcome. And play in the spiritual jazz, the enchantment of the improvisational nature and the healing that's provided through that level of spontaneity. There's something in that flow where we take the baggage of conditioning and false forms of education and misinformation, and we're a bundle of conditions, and many of the belief systems, I know you know this, many of the belief systems that have been illuminated through meditation and intimacy and the molecules, both organic and psychedelic, they've illuminated cultural, political, spiritual, religious, existential misinformation. And we become museums, if you will, of these invenerating false truths. And those who've corrected or are in correction of their views. One of the ones that I'm seeing, that I'm correcting right now, is taking their out of living. Let's hurry up and get through hospice to get to another womb to take birth. Rebirthing rather than dying. Taking fear out of the paradigm. I don't need your substances. I'm not anticipating fear in the face of suffering. So be it. That's simple. So, how well do you occupy your spiritual aesthetic? How well do you occupy your swagger? How well do you occupy your existential jazz? The spontaneity of a disciplined naturalness. To move with the flow. I noticed on the beach yesterday how the process was one of moving forward. Then I saw a woman who was literally, you might know her, dancing along the beach. It was like, and it's so, not rudely, but mystically interrupted my own habit pattern of walking up and down the beach. Not that either one was right or wrong, but it was, oh, okay, this woman is occupying her revolutionary naturalness, her own emotional aesthetic, and was interrupting the normalcy of what people generally do on the beach. I guess my own banality being questioned. Dancing along the beach. And then she actually began to dance in reversal of the direction that she had been going. And then she was going towards the water and then back away from the water. And then you couldn't even predict which direction she was going because she was in her improvisational, existential, spiritual, empowered aesthetic. There was something, I guess I want to say, trans-hospice about it. She helped me take the death out of my life. So as I kind of end today, there's so many ways to understand the word literacy. At the same time, the incoherent, inarticulate beauty of your way. Your way. This gatekeeper, very gifted to help me understand my way, my voice, my choice. How do you want to live? How do you want to die? How do you want to transition? Who do you want to be near? What do you want to be doing? How do you want to occupy your own mind? beautification of consciousness, the most defining word of my life, bhavana. The beautification of consciousness, the formation of rebirthing as a flower does infinitely to the radiance of the light of, for me, enlightenment. The process of overcoming fear and rejoicing in this grand, ambient, mysterious, terrifying world of form and infinity and consciousness. Welcome to life. That was my gift that I came to from yesterday to today. Rebirthing into life, taking the destination out of the journey, no longer going from here to there. And learning to dance on the beach rather than just walk. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. Have a beautiful day. God willing, see you tomorrow. Thank you.